Stop going up and down the ladder every time you need a tool or a part. Let me show you how to build a customizable ladder caddy so you can have all your tools and parts available when you're standing on the ladder.
This ladder caddy attaches to almost any fold-up ladder. The two sides attach to the legs of the ladder with bolts and wing nuts. The triangles make sure that the platform is not going to slide down and allow you to make it level. And because it's a platform, you can add any holes or any customization you need for the tools that you typically use.
In terms of supplies to build it, we're going to use a simple 1x3 finger joint pine. Costs only a few dollars at the home improvement store, and a piece of plywood. I'm using 3/4 inch plywood here. That's what I would recommend. You could use 1/2 inch as well, although I think the 3/4 is going to be more stable. And most of the time you might have a scrap piece around. We're going to need one that's 10 inches by 20 inches. So just check your scrap pile to see if you have that. That's what we're going to need, as well as 3-inch 8-32 bolts, as well as the wing nuts for those.
Start by measuring two 20-inch pieces from the 1x3 board. Cut those pieces with a miter saw, circular saw, or I chose to use my jigsaw. Keep the cut straight by holding or clamping a speed square and use that to guide the saw. Mark the triangles using the speed square and cut them using the square as a guide. Because these pieces are smaller, clamping the square to the board and the work table is helpful. You will cut 4 triangles in total. Cut the plywood to 10 inches by 20 inches. Now my scrap piece was already 20 inches on one side, so I just needed to cut the width to 10 inches. To determine where to drill the holes, you should test the pieces with your ladder. You want the 2 horizontal sides to sit 1 to 2 inches above the top step. Place the triangles on the ladder legs to determine where the holes should be drilled on the sides. For my pretty typical 6-foot ladder, the holes are 4 3/4 inches from each end on the 2 sides. Now, I'm using very common number 8-32 bolts, and you want the holes to allow the bolt to smoothly go in without it being too loose. The drill bit to use for these number 8-32 bolts is a 3/16 inch drill bit. I drilled the holes in each end of each side rail by clamping the rails together and drilling through both rails at the same time, so I know the holes will line up. Then I drilled the holes in each triangle at about the center of each triangle. Because the triangles are too small to clamp, I held them over one of the dog holes in my workbench so I could drill the hole without damaging my workbench. I finished by testing that the bolt goes through the rail, the triangle, and the other rail, as it will need to when attached to the ladder.
The next step is to lay out where we want the holes for the various tools that we want to put in. Now, I've done a fair amount of thinking about this, and what I figured out is that for a typical screwdriver, the hole should be 1/2 inch diameter. For a pair of needle nose pliers, 1 inch in diameter. And for wire cutters, I need a 1 inch by 1.5 inch. Those are the typical type of things you're going to want to hold on here. And what I like to do is to use a 3/4 inch buffer between the various holes, the edges of the holes, just because that gives the tool enough space to be there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide what end I want to start with. So this is my piece, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose that this is the edge I'm going to attach to the rail, and this will be the front, so I'm going to attach it to the right side. Again, I'm probably going to do both the ends at some point in time, but I'll just start with this one. So I'm going to mark 3/4 of an inch on my board here, and 3/4 inch here, and then I'll use my speed square. So this will essentially be like an exclusionary zone. So nothing goes into there. The holes will come up to that edge. And again, this is going to be the outside. So I'll mark 3/4 inches here as well. So now this gives me a visual to make sure I don't drill into those areas. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 holes for screwdrivers here, one for the needle nose pliers and one for the wire cutters. And So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark where the center of the hole is. So I know that the 1/2 inch hole, 1/4 inch is going to be the center. So I'm going to mark 1/4 inch from each of the edges, the lines there. So my first hole is going to be drilled right there. So then I know that that's going to be a 1/2 inch hole. So it's going to go to here. Then I need another 3/4 as a buffer. So that gets me, so the edge is going to be at 1 1/4, add 3/4, I get to 2. So 2 1/4 is where I'm going to drill my next hole. And again, 1/4 inch in from the line there. So these are going to be my two 1/2 inch holes for my 2 screwdrivers. Now, the next one I need is a 1 inch hole, but again, I need my buffer. So this is going to go to 1 1/4, so I'm going to go to 2, and that's going to be the edge of my hole, the 1 inch hole, so 1/2 inch in from that. And this again, I need to make sure that I am 1/2 inch in. So that's where my 1 inch hole is going to be. My 1/2 inch hole, my 1/2 inch hole, my 1 inch hole. And then I need to measure over again. So my 1 inch hole goes to here, a 3/4. So I'm now at 3 3/4. And I know it's going to be 1 inch wide by 1 1/2 inches this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create that using 2 1 inch holes. So again, my hole goes to here, my buffer, 1/2 inch in. So I'm at 4 1/4 from that edge. And I'm going to be 1/4, going to be 1 at 1 1/4 for that. And then I'm just going to, so that will come, that hole will come to 2 3/4. So I'm going to just go 1/4 inch after that. So I'm going to put another hole here. The way you drill these holes, I have found the easiest way to do that are using spade bits. Spade bits tend to go through cleanly. Now, the other thing, when you are drilling these holes, you can have a lot of blowout on the backside if you don't have a scrap piece of wood underneath when you drill the hole through. So I'm going to get a scrap piece of wood that I can drill into with these holes. You can mark them out. Again, decide on how many you want, the configuration you want, the end that you want them, and this gives you a lot of flexibility. Drill as straight as I can down. So you can see how drilling the 2 holes together pretty much gives me what I need. I could clean that up with a jigsaw if I wanted to make these straight. So now I have my holes for screwdrivers, I have my holes for my needle nose pliers, and the wire cutters. So let me grab those and I can show you how that works. So I've got a couple of screwdrivers, some larger ones. See the spacing there works. Needle nose pliers, wire cutters fit in there. And now we have created spaces for all the tools that we want. We can, again, continue on. We've got a lot of space here to decide what else we want to put in to our ladder caddy to be able to hold our tools. But I'm going to start with that and give you a sense of sort of how you can think about and design this on your own.
To attach the top to the outside rail, I clamped the top on the rail. Then I drilled countersink holes and attached the pieces using 1 1/4 inch screws. I clamped the pieces together when attaching the screws to make it tight. The triangles are too small for screws, and all they really need is wood glue to provide the extra support for the top. So I glued the triangles underneath the top and waited for the glue to dry. Before attaching the caddy to the ladder, I sanded everything to make it smooth.
So this is where it's going to be mounted. I'm going to start by putting the 3-inch 8-32 bolts from underneath the top out towards where they're going to be. That's down, and I'm going to get my 2 triangles and put them on. Okay. So now, make sure that the long sides of the triangles are up against the 2 legs of the ladder on this side. And then I get the bolts through. Now, often you have to lift it up because otherwise it's trying to twist on you to get the bolts to align in the holes. There we go. Okay. So now what you want to do before you tighten everything fully, just at least get the wing nuts on so that they don't, so the bolts don't fall out. Before you tighten everything for sure, what you want to do is you want to make sure it's level. So I'm going to grab my torpedo level out of my toolbox because that's the easiest way to make this. Make sure that you're level. Okay, I'm going to go quite a ways off, so that's where we need to adjust it. Make sure that it's level, that the triangle's long sides are flat on the legs of the ladder. And once it's level, then we can tighten it, the wing nuts, fully so that it grips onto the legs of the ladder here and it won't slip or move. Sometimes you might need a screwdriver for the bolts underneath, but often I find that's not necessary. So that's pretty good in terms of level. Now we have the platform on our ladder. It's nice and sturdy, and now I can start putting the tools into those various holes. So again, I'll have a couple of screwdrivers, I'll have my wire strippers, I'll have my needle nose pliers, and now when I climb up the ladder, I can easily access those tools, put them back. I don't have to keep coming down. I can have other parts on here as well.
You can customize the ladder caddy in many different ways.
One of the things you can add is a magnetic tray which holds these screws or any other metal parts to these magnetic areas so they won't drop off. This is especially helpful when you have a number of screws or bolts that you have to put in and you don't want to hold them. Just put them in this magnetic tray. It is magnetic on the bottom as well, so if you had a metal place that you wanted to put something on your top here and then stick this to, that would be a great way as well. This ladder caddy also works really well when you're painting. It's easy to fit a gallon or a quart onto the top, and you know it's going to be secure because it'll hold that weight quite easily. You could also use the holes here if your brush fits in, if you wanted to do that as well. Another option for larger tools, perhaps like a drill, if you wanted to not have it stand on top, is to build this sort of add-on to the back. Could be back or front. And what I've done here is I have cut a hole that's 3 inches by 4 inches for the drill. There's another hole there for another size tool. But then I have bolted it on, and so I drilled holes 3 inches from each side and 4 inches from the back edge, and then just mark those holes on this piece of board that I added on, and then those bolts underneath are just held on by wing nuts. So I can attach this extra piece when I need it for the drill or other tools, or I can take it off. Now, of course, if you have tool holders like screwdriver holes at this end, it will cover them up. but it's temporary. So it means that you can extend the functionality of this ladder caddy however you want.
This customizable ladder caddy can save you time on your DIY projects because you don't have to go up and down the ladder to get the tools or parts that you're working with. If you found this video helpful, here's some other videos I think you'll also find interesting. Thanks for watching.